Hey, this is Phil, a.k.a. Corinne.
And I'm Alex Berg, and you're listening to the I'm from Driftwood podcast.
My name is Alexander Zuccaro. I'm originally from Toms River, New Jersey.
My name is Helfrich, and I'm from Pleasantville, New Jersey. Swear to God, Pleasantville.
I can remember growing up always feeling strange, odd, and different. Not just for, being gay, but being artistic as well. I never really hung out with the boys who wanted to play sports, but I didn't really like to hang out with the girls either on the swing sets. I wanted to, do my own thing.
Okay, so there's this whole thing about when did you know you were gay, right? And I never really, I always had half of me that knew and then half of me that didn't know. Half of me was totally in denial.
Alexander and Anne both talked about these childhood crushes they had on famous pop culture characters and how that helped them recognize their own sexual orientation.
The half of me that was disappointed when my softball coach got married. I was like, what the fuck? Or when Darlene got a boyfriend on Roseanne. What are you talking about? But I didn't know I was gay. But I was so disappointed that she was, that she had a boyfriend. Didn't make any sense.
She talked about being very, really upset about Darlene getting a boyfriend.
Oh, yes!
Which I thought was so great because, Darlene is not a queer character, although she was a queer character in some ways. Because I was so starved for queer characters as I was growing up, there were definitely people on TV or that time that weren't queer, but, they just Joe from Facts of Life. There were plenty of butches that I know who were like, oh my God, Joe, yeah, we're all Joe, we're all Joe. Oh
it's always so fascinating when we as LGBTQ people see ourselves in these people, or at least are attracted to them in a way that makes us realize we're not straight.
So when I was a little kid, I was 5 years old, my best friend Dorothy used to kiss Michael J. Fox on the TV, right? So she would get up and run to the TV. Oh, Michael J. I can't believe we were little, 5. We were little, but she would run up and kiss him. And I tried to do that. I wanted to be able to kiss Michael J. Fox, but it just didn't work for me. I would try, and I felt it in my body, it wasn't right. And the person that I had a crush on, that I really wanted to kiss, was totally Marianne from Gilligan's Island. And I loved her. And I remember when I was when no one else was in the room, and I was little, I was as tall as the TV. I remember the TV being here, and I was standing up. I would kiss Marianne from Gilligan's Island. I would wait for her, in the credits when the circles come up, So I would wait for her circle to come up. I remember waiting, and then the professor, Marianne, and I would kiss Marianne. I loved Marianne. She was so sweet.
For me, it made me think about some of those early characters that I saw, and I have one that's a little bit embarrassing, which is...
I want to know who it is.
Okay. So Legolas, one of the elves from Lord of the Rings.
Yes!
I don't know if you remember. Okay.
Yes! Very sexy. Very sexy.
Okay.
I get it.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel so vindicated. So Legolas is played by Orlando Bloom. And the reason, so this character has very long hair, is extremely androgynous.
Yes.
And
yes,
it was one of the first really androgynous characters that I saw. And I was like, why am I the only one of my friends who thinks that Legolas is a hottie?
You were alone? That's a shame.
I know, isn't it?
You had no one to talk to about this. It's terrible.
But for me, I think that seeing this character, it helped me realize, okay, maybe I'm experiencing attraction in a different way than some of my friends, which I feel like that's a little bit of what Anne and Alexander talked about.
It's interesting because with Anne, her childhood crush was Marianne from Gilligan's Island, oddly enough. And with Alexander, he was all about Hercules.
When I kind of subconsciously knew I was gay was when I was about 5 years old, which was in 1999. I had a bedspread from the animated movie Hercules, which came out in 1997. I remember when I watched the movie, and I believe there might have been a cartoon as well for a short period of time, I just thought, this muscular man is saving all of these people, and he's really strong and heroic. Like, that was very attractive to me as a young child, and I wanted that kind of figure in my life.
Listen,
Cartoon character.
even cartoon characters are sometimes the queer representation that we need.
This is long before I realized it was queer, but you know what? I had to say that Lindsay Wagner, that Bionic Woman, got me every time.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, I was so into it. Much like Anne, I would say that I was also sort of split in terms of how I was viewing crushes, because to me, I had no real language to say what that feeling was, but I knew it was like, I just enjoy this person a lot. I really enjoy this person. I want to be around them. I want to see them. Didn't have the language to know that it was a crush. And I kind of understand Anne's love of Marianne, and realizing, I think she mentioned in that episode how her friend was so obsessed with Michael J. Fox, and she was just like, I can't get into this. Try as she might, she just could not get into it. So I didn't have the language, but I knew it was there, and it was just a feeling, but I had no real words for it.
I think that you bring up such a good point, which is that even though sometimes we know we have these characters are appealing to us, we don't have the language to describe what that even means.
Yes.
And that's something that you then have to figure out, or be able to have that contrast with a lot of your friends. One way for me that also happened is that as a femme queer person myself, I would always see femme characters that were straight women who I was like, wait a second, there's something about that character that I really connect with, but I'm not sure what it is. And it was always like really strong female badass characters. One of them would be Jennifer Love Hewitt in the movie Heartbreakers. It was like a movie in the early 2000s, and she is a con artist with her mom, who's played by Sigourney Weaver. Basically, the whole plot of this movie is that they are trying to con men out of money and use their like femininity, and they just have amazing fashion, and they're actually like really driven by their intelligence as well. And so I always really identified with her. And in some ways, the fact that she was like this strong badass who was like a little bit mean, kind of cunning, for some reason that really resonated with me as a femme. And the way that she performed her femininity kind of just really sat with me, I feel like, in a way that it didn't with some of the straight women who I was around.
I mean, I say that sort of depicts you right now today. I think that's you today.
Oh, I thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I think one of the things I found very striking about both of these examples is that they happen at such young ages.
I remember Hercules was on my pillowcase and thinking to myself, this is my boyfriend, And as a 5-year-old, I was making out with it. I was kissing it and holding it and thinking like, my God, my boyfriend's here and with me, like, at 5 years old, like, what does a 5-year-old know about, making out? But it was, with my pillow. It was just something I kept to myself because I didn't want anyone to find out. I would do it in my room alone in the dark. Like, it was this private, secret thing that no one would know about, that only I could get fulfillment from. It was meaningful to me because it kind of gave me an escape and an outlet to release these feelings that I felt, because I didn't feel comfortable enough to approach a classmate of mine on the playground and kiss him. I just couldn't do that. In my head, something was telling me that was wrong.
Like, he knew that in private was where he could really have these feelings, and he couldn't really just go up to someone on the playground and to some guy or some kid on the playground and decide to, express feelings. He knew that this was something that he needed to keep for himself, in private, alone at night. And it's just so interesting because I find those two stories so, it's just so interesting that they started so young to understand their feelings. I didn't have that in my life. I didn't have it until I was much older.
Yeah, same. I don't think that again, you talked about not having the language to be able to describe what it all means and your identity. And I definitely didn't have access to that kind of language until much later, or even was able to identify myself in that way, I think, until my early 20s. But it's also so striking that one of the things you said was that privacy aspect was that Alexander knew that even though maybe he hadn't explicitly been told that he couldn't express those feelings, he knew that he still had to keep it to the privacy of his own room, even at such a young age. And it just, to me, it's so signaling of the ways that we're taught as queer people from so young that that
Right.
that is something that you can't openly express.
But it's interesting because Alexander could have really decided that because he knew it wasn't right, he knew he couldn't express this outwardly in public, he could have really decided to sort of shut that part of himself down, right? He made a decision to have these moments with his Hercules pillowcase in private, which I thought was fascinating because he could have really decided there's some people queer people who go through this experience very early in their lives, and instead of acting on it in some way and expressing it privately, they decide they are just going to put it away. And I find it interesting that he really was able to go ahead and continue to express those feelings to the pillowcase, to Hercules, this very muscular sort of like, heroic sort of like character, instead of deciding, this is not right, and I'm not going to be, it's not going to be okay if I express these feelings. Pretty brave for a 5-year-old.
So by kissing my pillowcase, he couldn't talk back to me, and he couldn't make fun of me or ridicule me or tell me I was wrong. It was something that was just natural and just, I could just do without any problem. That was the first time I really knew I was gay, and I had these feelings that weren't like other boys or even like other girls. Yeah, and I still have the Hercules pillowcase today, and I still use it.
We live in a culture that discourages us from being able to talk about these things and talk about sexuality and attraction in an open way, even outside of being an LGBTQ person. And I really love that he even still has the pillowcase, because I think that there are also people who would feel like this is a shameful experience. And I think it's amazing to be able to own that moment, like own this moment that otherwise may have been imbued with shame or that you were taught to keep private, and be able to hold that Hercules pillowcase and be like, I still got it. It still brings me joy to have this around. I think that's really amazing.
My neighbor gave me a cutout of her recently, like the grown Mary Ann, like arrested for smoking marijuana. She's like 60 something. And had her mugshot. She was still pretty cute. I was like, oh, she's pretty hot for a 60-year-old. So that's my story. She was great.
Pop culture has evolved so much. I feel like right now, if you just think about TV, even public figures, there are so many different kinds of LGBTQ people.
Well, I think, first of all, kind of what we were talking about before, I think it's a little easier now than it was, because there are so many more representations than there were. There's a very good chance that if I had seen more queer representation when I was coming up, I wouldn't have had the disconnect in my actual life, which is just taking a little longer to come out and being a little more cautious about it. Like I made a beeline straight for it if that was the case.
One other thing about the media is I think it's so much fun to think about it in terms of the kind of crushes that we have on these people, and learning that we're LGBTQ vis-a-vis that way. One other thing, though, I think is that the media also teaches us what we should think of ourselves. And at the same time, while we may be learning about our sexual orientation or gender identity from some of these characters, I also think that like a lot of times we learn shame, or we learn that LGBTQ people are broken, or there's something wrong with us too. So it's the media, which is all to say, I mean, the media can be such a double-edged sword in terms of both affirming us, being a really fun vehicle to see ourselves represented and allow for self-discovery, but it can also teach us and everybody else stuff that is completely wrong and terrible about LGBTQ people.
As I was growing up, there were very few representations, and these days you look around and there's every shade and color and iteration of queer, and it's really wonderful. It's actually so nice because there's so many more references for people to look at and say, I do see myself in that, or I can recognize a sliver of myself in this or that. It's really beautiful. We've become a huge, massive community with so much diversity that's pretty incredible.
What's the first line? The weapons say a tale of a tiny ship who started on this tropic isle aboard this tiny ship. The fateful trip. The mate was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. The weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow would be lost. The ship should ground on the shore of this uncharted desert isle. With Gilligan, do-do-do-do-do, the skipper too, do-do-do-do-do-do, the millionaire and his wife, do-do, the movie star, the professor, and I never liked the movie star. She was so annoying to me. The professor and Marianne, here on Gilligan's Isle. You know, you have to wait through the whole thing to get to that one moment. I loved her. Standing right there.
The I'm from Driftwood podcast is hosted by Phil, a.k.a. Corinne,
and Alex Berg, and is produced by Andy Egan-Thorpe.
The podcast is recorded as part of I'm from Driftwood, a worldwide nonprofit LGBTQIA+ story archive, and is funded in part from TD Bank and Heritage of Pride, New York.
I'm from Driftwood was created by Nathan Mansky to help queer and trans people learn more about their community, help straight people learn more about their neighbors, and help everyone learn more about themselves, all through the power of storytelling. The IFD program director is Damian Middlefelt. The stories you heard today are available in their entirety, plus thousands more,
at imfromdriftwood.org. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And our score is provided by Elevate Audio. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks, y'all, for listening.